Why climate change is such a big deal and why will it affect Wisbech? Trying to understand climate change can be frustrating. We get bombarded with information on the television, in the news and on social media. But how much of it is fact and how much is sensationalism? Plus the whole subject becomes confounded by false information and conspiracy theories. The purpose of this presentation is to present the basic facts taken from credible sources so that you can make an informed decision on what impact climate change will have on you. I've referenced my hometown of Wisbech as it is particularly vulnerable because it sits on the tidal stretch of the River Nene. However, as climate change is a global phenomenon, its relevance is applicable to everyone. One of the primary problems is that we are producing far too much carbon dioxide. This graph shows CO2 levels over hundreds of thousands of years up to present day. As you can see that it cycles over time, not exceeding 300 parts per million in our atmosphere. That is until recent times when levels have taken off exponentially, reaching a record high in May 2023 of 424 parts per million. And these levels show no signs of falling anytime soon. Similarly, over the past 100 years, methane levels have also dramatically increased and are continuing to do so. Carbon dioxide and methane make up the majority of the so-called greenhouse gases that have a major influence on global temperatures. This rapid rise in greenhouse gases is because of a similar steep rise in the Earth's population. It currently stands at over 8 billion people, with no immediate signs that it will stop growing anytime soon. The majority of carbon dioxide and methane released into our atmosphere is due to human activity, including electricity production using fossil fuels, heavy industry, fossil fuel powered transport from aeroplanes and cars, and from livestock agriculture, with cattle, sheep, pigs and chickens now outnumbering humans. The release of large quantities of greenhouse gases into our atmosphere, particularly carbon dioxide, is causing global temperatures to rise. And they will continue to rise unless we can curb greenhouse gas emissions significantly. Gases such as CO2 trap heat and prevent it being released into space. With increasing levels of greenhouse gases, the Earth grows progressively warmer. To illustrate the power that CO2 has in regulation of the temperature of the Earth, if all the CO2 was removed from our atmosphere, the Earth's temperature would plummet by over 30 degrees centigrade. Since the last ice age, global temperatures over the past 10,000 years have remained relatively stable. Until now. In the past 100 years, temperatures have started to increase dramatically and currently stand at around 1.2 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. And they show no signs of slowing down. World governments are failing to keep temperatures below a 1.5 degree limit. At the current trajectory, global temperatures are on course to reach 1.8 degrees by 2027, 2.6 degrees by 2050 and 3.2 degrees by the end of the century. So why is it proving so difficult to reduce carbon dioxide levels, and why are atmospheric levels increasing so rapidly? The issue is that our atmosphere is only a very thin layer surrounding the Earth. The Earth is 8,000 miles across, and yet our breathable atmosphere in places is only 5 miles deep, and will soon become saturated with greenhouse gases. Increasing global warming is resulting in record temperatures being broken all over the world more frequently. Further evidence of increasing global warming was seen in 2023, with the hottest June on record compared to pre-industrial levels. And on the 6th of July, the hottest global air temperature in 80 years was reached. One aspect of global warming that is concerning scientists are the emergence of positive feedback loops that accelerate the whole process. Here are some examples of 3 major positive feedback loops that are accelerating global warming, but there are several others. Positive feedback loop 1. Ordinarily, snow and ice reflect a large proportion of heat and absorbing very little. However, increasing global temperatures is melting large amounts of land and sea ice and snow. The exposed sea and soil does not reflect the heat but absorbs it. This melts even more land and sea ice and snow, accelerating the whole process as a vicious cycle. Another serious positive feedback loop is occurring with the thawing of the permafrost. Permafrost is permanently frozen soil or underwater sediment that contains large amounts of dead biomass. Due to global warming, it is starting to thaw, releasing large amounts of methane and carbon dioxide. These greenhouse gases warm the planet, which subsequently causes even more permafrost to thaw, and so the cycle continues to accelerate. The third major positive feedback loop is the result of long periods of drought caused by global warming. Forests and pastures become very dry. They more easily ignite, and the frequency of forest fires increases. Burning trees and pastures releases large quantities of carbon dioxide, which exacerbates global warming further. Then, periods of drought get worse, and so the cycle begins all over again, reinforcing itself as it cycles. And forest fires are certainly increasing in frequency. In Europe, in 2022, the number of fires reached an all-time record since satellite records began in 2006. Around 2 million acres of land were burned between January and August alone. In 2022 in the United States, almost 8 million acres of forest were destroyed by wildfires. And in Australia, bushfires destroyed 42 million acres of forest, killing 3 billion animals, including 61,000 koalas. In the UK, forest fires have increased by 600% in just 3 years. In July 2022, Cambridgeshire Fire Service was called out to 60 field fires in just 2 days. A report commissioned by the UN calculated that due to climate change and regional drought, wildfires would increase by 14% in 2030, 30% by 2050 and 50% by 2100. So why are scientists becoming concerned by positive feedback loops? Well, there is sort to be a tipping point, a point of no return, where feedback loops go into an unstoppable, irreversible, self-perpetuating runaway phase. And scientists can't predict what happens next, as this is unprecedented. However, there was a previous time in Earth's history when CO2 levels became elevated, driving up global temperatures. We could use this as an example of what could happen. That was 252 million years ago, when a Siberian volcano released massive amounts of CO2 and global temperatures rose dramatically. The result was that nearly all life on Earth was destroyed. 95% of marine life and 70% of all terrestrial life went extinct. The consequences of uncontrolled global warming could be catastrophic to our very existence. And there are signs that positive feedback loops may have already started to kick in. If you look at the global sea temperatures over previous years, they have remained within limits. However, for 2023, global sea temperatures have gone rogue and started to climb way outside those previous limits. The consequences of these rising sea temperatures and global air temperatures is that they are causing the polar caps to melt. In 2022, temperatures in Antarctica reached a record 18 degrees C and a record 38 degrees C in the Arctic. And Antarctic sea ice shrank to below 2 million square kilometres, the most it's ever done since satellite records began 43 years ago. And once again, data for 2023 shows that Antarctic sea ice is shrinking at rates way outside the normal limits seen in previous years. Melting ice caps are causing sea levels to rise. At the moment they are rising at 3.4 millimetres per year, with no signs of them slowing down. And since the 1900s, sea levels around the UK have risen 16.5 centimetres. Another global warming related phenomenon that we have experienced in the UK is an increase in the frequency and intensity of storms, leading to flash flooding. An example of this was seen in 2022, when up to August the UK had 49,439 lightning strikes. 26,718 were in just 4 days. There were more strikes in those 4 days than in the whole of 2021 put together. In addition, data shows that 7 of the top 10 wettest years on record in the UK have occurred in the past 5 years. Similarly, 9 out of the top 10 hottest temperatures for the UK have occurred since 1990, and 4 out of 5 of the hottest temperatures in the UK have occurred in the past 3 years. So why is the UK and more recently mainland Europe achieving these high temperatures? Ordinarily, cold air in the north butts up against the warm air in the south. This creates high altitude, high speed 300 mile/h winds around 4 miles up. This is the jet stream. This jet stream does meander, but its curves are usually shallow. As the Arctic warms, the jet stream weakens and starts to oscillate wildly. Loops in the jet stream drag up hot air from North Africa, which happened in the UK in July 2022, when the UK achieved a record 40 degrees C, and in mainland Europe, 12 other European countries broke their previous temperature records. It is estimated that these extreme temperatures were responsible for 61,000 extra deaths. Similarly, records were again broken in 2023, with several countries exceeding temperatures of 45 degrees, and Sicily reaching a record 48.8 degrees centigrade. It is becoming apparent that our weather systems are becoming more extreme. In the UK, for example, we achieved the wettest February on record for the UK in 2020 at 209 millimetres in total for that month. In 2022, an extreme opposite was achieved in our region of East Anglia, with less than 15 millimetres of rainfall in the whole month of July, setting a new drought record. This is particularly worrying as this region produces 1/4 of all the cereal, fruit and vegetable consumed in the UK. The predicted increase in frequency of drought has prompted Anglia Water to invest £2 billion in a new reservoir near Chatteris and a second one near Boston in Lincolnshire to mitigate against future water shortages. So how will global warming affect Wisbech? Well, the Fens is one of the lowest regions in the UK, with much of it at or below sea level. As sea levels continue to rise, spring tides with prevailing northerly winds will become a problem. Here is a map plotting the areas at risk from flooding with a sea level rise of just 1.5 feet. The predicted increase in frequency of flooding in the Fens has prompted the investment of £38 million in the largest pumping station in Europe on the River Ouse near St Germans. Wisbech has flooded in the past. This photo shows the North Brink in 1949 following a particularly high spring tide. And again in 1953, this region was also heavily flooded. Following those floods and several near misses, a flood wall was built along the banks of the Nene. However, in 1978, this proved to be inadequate. It was breached by a particularly high tide. Several areas of Wisbech were flooded, many homes were destroyed, and one person died. Those of you familiar with Wisbech will recognise Edinburgh Drive and Sybil Road in these photos, showing the extensive flooding, but many other areas were affected. Following the floods in the of 78, the photo on the right shows the flood wall was raised by about a metre. However, with sea levels rising due to global warming, this flood defence system could prove inadequate. And the International Panel on Climate Change has calculated that sea levels could rise by a metre or more by the end of the century. This warning was echoed in a report by the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Independent Commission on Climate Change, which stated, if we are heading to a temperature rise closer to 3 degrees C, sea level rise could reach a metre or more. Communities, farms and industry in the areas of Wisbech, Whittlesea, Huntingdon, St Ives and the eastern edge of Peterborough face the highest risk. The flood risk assessment in Wisbech master plan, published in November 22, shows that Wisbech already currently carries a significant flood risk. Quote, "There remains a residual risk in areas within the town centre that are in flood zones 3, as the existing defence could be breached or overtopped." These grey areas are flood zones 3. Tidal surges around Britain have risen by a foot since the 1900s. This graph shows progressively higher tidal surges due to sea level rise, with no sign of it slowing down. The increased frequency of intense rainfall and flash floods will exacerbate those surges. A Level 1 flood risk assessment commissioned by Fenland District Council and published by Royal Haskoning in 2022 confirms that the severity of flooding in the Fens will only increase in future, as climate change induced sea level rise will result in the mean high water spring tide level on the River Nene increasing from 3.8 metres in 2017 to 3.93 metres in 2035 to 4.27 metres in 2065 and 5.28 metres in 2125. So in conclusion, global temperatures are continuing to rise and show no signs of slowing. The polar ice caps are melting at an even faster rate with no signs of stopping. Sea levels are continuing to rise unabated. Positive feedback loops are accelerating the whole process. The risk of flooding to Wisbech will increase with time. We all hope in the near to medium term resources can be made available to protect Wisbech and other Fenland towns from the devastating effects of climate change. Thank you for listening.